This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi along the Tom Bigby River, and sometimes I write about the rest of the state. This episode is titled Leave Her to Heaven, and it's about a family from Macon, Mississippi, which is along the Tom Bigby River, about 20 to 30 miles from Columbus. Fisher Ames Patey was a decorated war hero who died on the beaches of Normandy, France in World War II. Fisher came from a long line of soldiers. He was the great-great-grandson of Sylvanus Ames, a chaplain of General George Washington. He was the great-great-nephew of Confederate General James Longstreet, a brilliant tactician who later served post-war as a diplomat and civil servant. Fisher Patey grew up in Macon, Mississippi on the Black Belt Prairie on a family farm. He was an avid outdoorsman and loved fishing and bird hunting. He graduated from Mississippi State University, where he was the editor of MSU's Reveille, which is the yearbook. He entered the U.S. Army as a lieutenant and was later promoted to captain. Before leaving for war, he married Anne Dudley Swope of Columbus. And Dudley was a graduate of the University of Tennessee, and her parents were Walter Ashby Swope and Fannie Moore Evans Swope. Fisher's mother, Sarah Fisher Ames Patey, was quite upset when she was told of the engagement of Fisher to Anne Dudley. Fisher was an only child. His brother Edmund Jr. had died at almost 2 years of age. His mother apparently doted on Fisher, and no woman was good enough in her eyes for her son. Sarah was renowned for her histrionics and her over-the-top behaviors, both towards her son, Fisher, and toward her husband, Edmund. Fisher was quite used to her behaviors. Sarah was known for, quote, taking to her bed from just after New Year's until spring, often until Easter, because of, quote, the boredom of winter was intolerable. But mention a party or a need to plan a get-together of some social function, and she'd fly from her bed and bounce forth as the belle of the ball. Fisher, then, was not surprised she did not take his engagement announcement well, and her threats of her impending death were because of his, quote, thoughtless behavior. How dare he get engaged? Fisher and Anne Dudley married at First Baptist Church in Columbus on March 10, 1942. He left for war, and in July of 1944, Fisher fell in Vesely, Normandy, while leading the 28th Infantry Company L in battle. According to family lore, Anne Dudley had been living in Fort Jackson near Charleston, South Carolina, at Fisher's duty station after they were married in Columbus, but when he shipped out to Europe in the spring of 1944, she moved home to her parents, pregnant with their first child. On the day of Fisher's death, Anne Dudley was seated in the dining room and saw Fisher's ghost walk across the living room. She knew he was dead. Distraught, she went upstairs, awaiting a telegram. She miscarried that night and soon after was officially notified of Fisher's death. And Dudley would later remarry Frank Slate, Fisher's commanding officer, and they would remain together, raising 2 sons and traveling the world together. She and Frank are both buried at Arlington Cemetery. Fisher's mother, Sarah Fisher Ames, was apparently quite well known in her extended family for her over-the-top behavior, and apparently she was not just overly dramatic, was also known to be quite manipulative. She was the socialite of Macon, and no one dared challenge her for fear of being dropped from all local social events. She was incredibly petty and possessive of her husband, Edmund, who was a local successful farmer, and of course Fisher, her son, before his death. She even tried to insert herself between Fisher and his new wife, accusing Fisher of choosing his pregnant wife over his own mother. It was really a toxic theatrical lady, to say the least. She kind of reminds me of the dreadful woman, played by Jean Tierney, in one of my favorite film noir melodramas, Leave Her to Heaven, which was produced by Daryl Zanuck and 20th Century Fox in the 1940s. My sister Elizabeth and I are both film noir buffs, and I absolutely love dark gothic tales and psycho thrillers. Leave Her to Heaven is all that and more. It is about a socialite who marries a writer, and she is one dangerous and obsessive wife who is, well, a bit nuts. She accuses others of plotting her demise while she ends up feeding herself arsenic to frame one of the other women with her murder. I won't spoil the ending, but a psychopathic femme fatale is going to be calculating till the end, of course. Years ago, my sister and I both read the book the screenplay was adapted from, and I had forgotten the author's name. And at a recent discussion with her, we both went looking for his name, Ben Ames Williams. So I did a little digging and found Ben Ames Williams was born in 1889 in Macon, Mississippi. He was the son of Daniel Webster Williams, who I think is originally from Ohio, and Sarah Marshall Ames of Macon. Sarah was the younger sister of John Fisher Ames, and Sarah's little niece, Sarah Fisher Ames, was named for her. Little Sarah Fisher Ames, who grew up to be Fisher Patty's mother. Excuse me, Fisher Patty's mother. Sarah Fisher Ames Patty was Ben Ames Williams, the author of Leave Her to Heaven, first cousin. Ben, while born in Macon, his family left Mississippi when he was an infant, but he spent many summers and holidays with his extended family in Mississippi. He was an avid hunter, especially of waterfowl. Ben began his professional publishing life after attending Dartmouth, and he started writing short stories and essays. He entered into writing novels at night while working as a reporter for the Boston American by day. His first novel would end up being published in 1919. And all during the time he was writing novels into the 1920s and prior, he actually was a well-published short story writer as well. His last novel was published posthumous in 1953. Strange Women, published in 1942, and Leave Her to Heaven in 1944, were distributed novels during World War II to those serving overseas by the American press, which was a military arm of publishing that sent out books and magazines and other literature to soldiers and those serving the military in Europe. When Leave Her to Heaven was still unpublished, Zelnick spent $100,000 on its film rights. It was published in June of 1944. Williams, when asked about the femme fatale focus of the story, responded, "It isn't just about morals. It explores the vicious aspects of a woman's character. And the reader abhors the woman herself and feels pity for her rather than esteem by the end of the novel." Williams was concerned with understanding the human condition and human tragedy. In Williams's own words, "It is seldom possible to even write a short story without some investigation of the factual background. It has been necessary for me at various times to study a wide range of subjects, some who are even very close to me. I have to know something about detective methods." Ben died on the ice, curling, after throwing a winning stone on February 4th, 1953, at the age of 63 in Brookline, Massachusetts. His ashes were scattered on a knoll of his favorite writing retreat site, his family farm in Searmount, Maine, called Hard Scrabble Farm. Now then, I ask you, Since all writers write about that which they know, what do you think? Was he writing about his cousin or other women in his family? Or was it just that evil part of the character of some women and some men that he knew? I want to thank you for coming on today's episode of Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.